Hey everyone. So I wanted to begin with Jesus has asked me to clarify something about oaths. He shared this verse with me and has prompted me to share it with you. So let's look at it. And it's Acts 2, verses 29 through 36. Acts 2, 29 through 36. Brethren, I may confidently say to you regarding the patriarch David, that he both died and was buried, and his tomb is with us to this day. And so, because he was a prophet, and knew that God had sworn to him with an oath to seat one of his descendants upon his throne, he looked ahead and spoke of the resurrection of the Christ, that he was neither abandoned to Hades, nor did his flesh suffer decay. This Jesus God raised up again, to which we are all witnesses. Therefore, having been exalted to the right hand of God, and having received from the Father the promise of the Holy Spirit, he has poured forth this which you both see and hear. For it was not David who ascended into heaven, but he himself says, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand, until I make thine enemies a footstool for thy feet. Therefore let all of the house of Israel know for certain that God has made him both Lord and Christ, this Jesus whom you crucified. Again with a quote that started me on this path of research. And there are two locations so noted in this article from St. Croix Abbas, dated July of 1929. And they are Brownsea, an island in Dorset, and Arrow Park in Birkenhead. And let's begin with Brownsea Island in Dorset, which is in the UK. This is the first article I came across when searching this topic at the Library of Congress. I thought it was worth reading because it sheds some light on islands being used for a long time now for questionable purposes, to say the least. The title of this article is very telling itself. Uncrowned Kings. And let me quote here. Several men of wealth in Europe are real monarchs. Close quote. Apart from the fact that he was the most successful chocolate manufacturer in the world. Wait a minute, I thought Hershey was, but I digress. M. Henry Menier, or Menier, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, so I'm going to say Menier, who died recently, had another claim to distinction. He was monarch of Anticosti, an island in the mouth of the St. Lawrence, 125 miles long by 50 miles broad, which he purchased in 1896 for £25,000. Menier's object in purchasing the island was to transform it into the biggest private game reserve in the world. He had it stocked with all sorts of animals and had 2 armed steamers to protect the island and its fisheries. Anticosti, however, is a small island kingdom when compared with some of those scattered around the shores of the United Kingdom, which are owned and reigned over by private individuals. In the Outer Hebrides, whose present ruler is Major Matheson, boast an area of over 400,000 acres and a population of nearly 30,000 people. Indeed, it's the largest island in the UK next to Ireland. On its extensive moors and forest land, the red deer still roam, while its magnificent lochs are unequaled for fishing. It is in northern waters, too, that Arran is situated, an interesting island kingdom reigned over by the beautiful Marchioness of Graham, wife of the son and heir of the Duke of Montrose. Over 5,000 people inhabit the island, which is some 19 miles long. The Marquis of Bute lords it over a kingdom, the island of Bute, in the Firth of Clyde, with a population of 11,000 souls. Not far away is the beautiful island of Islay, now governed by Mr. Hugh Morrison, brother-in-law of Lord Granville. And I'm skipping around a little bit through this article for time purposes. Rum Island is reigned over by Sir John Bullough during this time. Rum Island are some of the, on Rum Island, there are some of the finest herds and provides some of the best shooting in Scotland. The place indeed abounds with every variety of game, which is zealously guarded by its owner. In the Outer Hebrides is another island kingdom, the island of North Uist, belonging to Sir Arthur Campbell Ord, who served with great distinction in the South African War. No one can land or reside upon the islands without the owner's permission. While it is also free from taxation, or rather no rates or taxes can be levied without the consent of the ruler. So let me just pause here to state the obvious question. How long have islands been used this way? And let's remember each person referred to as Sir, which is most of these island owners, has at least been knighted or is that degreed in Freemasonry to have earned that title. But let's go back to the article. This article goes on to state many different owners of these private islands. If you would like to read that, you can go to the Library of Congress and research some of these islands. But if we look into this book that I found at the Library of Congress website, we're looking at Brownsea Island. So firstly, right off, I found this interesting quote in the preface of it and would like to share it with you. Such motives and feelings do prevail. He who explores the recorded annals of past ages or ascends into the mist of traditionary legend finds in his researches reward for the past and encouragement to proceed. Okay, so the description of Brownsea Island and its etymology, it first notes in this book that a William Benson Esquire bought the island of Brownsea, setting up a title to the castle and fortress there. It also goes on to say that the Cabot family, with fisheries off of Newfoundland, established a connection with the county of Poole and these fisheries around 1583. It also goes on to point out a connection to the Carolinas and these fisheries. This was commerce trade between America and the UK. Brownsea Island, or should I say, Baden-Powell turned Brownsea Island into a scout camp in 1907. But if we look, it states that King Henry VIII erected and built a castle and fortress on the island of Brownsea, directly opposite to the mouth or entering in of our harbor, about a league from the town, and the same furnished with ordnance and ammunition, your petitioner's ancestors, in return of his said majesty's clemency, and did agree to furnish 6 men to watch and ward in the same castle, which has ever since been done. Basically, you have the acknowledgement here that King Henry VIII established Brownsea Island under his rule, and it has been looked after by royalty ever since, to protect the heirs of this castle and fortress up until Benson, or at least until he acquired it. It is also interesting to note that Brownsea was provided arms and artillery, and in 1644 an order was given from the Isle of Wight in defense of this castle. Previous accounts of Brownsea are given that imply there were mines in Brownsea, copper and aluminum. It's with King Henry VIII that we start to see special instructions, for a lack of a better word here, with regards to Brownsea Island. But why? And what are the connections between the etymology of the word miners and minors? Either way, isn't children a reference here? The book claims that Brownsea derives its name from having formerly in the possession of Bruno, the island of Bruno. We find that studland, to which the island of Brownsea belongs, was held at that time together with many other manors by the Earl of Morton, and that in the time of Edward the Confessor, many of the possessions that were granted to that earl had been held by Bruno, and amongst others, the manor of Buckhorn Weston, in the fortunes of which Brownsea seems to have shared. The word has been variously spelt, from Brownsea to Branksea to Bronxsea to Brinksea. It is an island of irregular shape. Brownsea Island and Castle, without a doubt, is a very unique and special place that deserves more attention. Look at what Wikipedia has to say about Brownsea Island. The island is now owned by the National Trust, which is a heritage and nature conservation charity and membership organization in England, Wales, and North Ireland. Much of the island is now open to the public and has views of the Isle of Purbeck or Durbeck. It does acknowledge here that it was an experimental camp in 1907 for Boy Scouts. The island is accessed by public ferry or private boat. Located on the island is Brownsea Castle, aka Branksea Castle. that was originally a device fort, we already know built by King Henry VIII. Interesting to note here, with my family being from Louisiana, and Louisiana being the only state to have parishes in the United States, I always heard that parishes came from the French, by all the French influence started by Napoleon Bonaparte. But here we see the word used over in the United Kingdom, and I think it's worth noting. So in England, the Brownsea Island forms part of a civil parish, which is used for local government. It is a territorial designation. Civil parishes can trace their origins to the ancient system of parishes, which for centuries were the principal unit of secular and religious administration in most of England and Wales. The ancient system of parishes have their roots in Roman Catholic, or in the Roman Catholic Church, or in Roman Catholicism. Each is within 42 dioceses, divided between the 30 of the province of Canterbury and the 12 of York. The entire island is designated a site of special scientific interest, which in Great Britain, or an area of special scientific interest in the Isle of Man and North Ireland, is a conservation designation denoting a protected area in the UK and the Isle of Man. They allege the first record of inhabitants on Brownsea Island occurred when a small chapel and hermitage were built by monks from Cerne Abbey near Dorchester. Eventually, control of Brownsea was passed to the Crown, and to its restoration, as we already know, by King Henry VIII. To summarize here, Brownsea Island changed through many wealthy owners, some who expanded the grounds and castle over time. However, one of the darkest stories about Brownsea occurred during this time period, that Sir Augustus John Foster was living there, a retired British diplomat who slit his own throat and died in the castle in 1848, or so the story goes. However, the passing through distinguished hands of ownership continued for Brownsea. From the 1870s of George Cavendish Bentnick to the 1890s of Kenneth Robert Balfour, to the early 1900s of Charles Van Raalte, to 1907, where Van Raalte handed it over to Baden-Powell for the purpose of the experimental camp for Boy Scouts. Brownsea was a self-supporting island that had a kitchen garden and a dairy herd. Baden-Powell used it from 1907 to 1927, after which a Mary Bonham Christie purchased Brownsea, and interestingly enough was called the Demon of Brownsea because she was a recluse. And basically, she banned the public from coming there during the rest of her lifetime, I believe starting in 1934. Supposedly, there was a devastating wildfire in 1934 that preempted Miss Bonham Christie, because of her trauma, to ban public access. So this all led to the Dorset Wildlife Trust that leased a nature preserve there, protecting it, thus allowing the return of scouts and guides. The island was opened to the public in May of 1963 by Lady Olive Baden-Powell, who was the wife of Robert Baden-Powell, and it was attended by members of the 1907 camp, and still continues to attract visitors, especially those involved with scouting, to this day. In 1964, the island has hosted the Brownsea Open Air Theater, annually performing the works of William Shakespeare during the months of July and August. That sounds like nothing but a ritual to me. And as an interesting side note, Brownsea Island is twinned with Taddy Ho, France. And what do I mean by that? They state that Brownsea Island is the twin island to Taddy Ho, France. So let's look at that for just a minute. This is one of many islets of the Channel Islands, thus the HOU at the end of the name Taddy Ho. It is in the Normandy region of France, and the most interesting things I found about Taddy Ho is first, in 1720, it was used for quarantining plague victims from Marseille. Second, the watchtower on Taddy Ho is among the fortifications of Vauban, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Why? Why did UNESCO find this property so important? Well, this heritage site, being the twin island to Brownsea, was designed by the renowned military architect Sébastien Le Prestre de Vauban during the reign of King Louis XIV, who is the very same king that Louisiana and St. Louis, Missouri derived their name from. The key words here are military architect. The military is associated with Brownsea. So I find all of that very fascinating. There seems to be a connection with the military between these two areas. So these sites were chosen because they exemplify Vauban's work. This what I just pointed out here. All of these locations. And they bear witness to the influence of his designs on military and civilian engineering on a global scale during the 17th through the 20th centuries. Because of the extensive history they prescribed to this individual on building military forts, citadels, bastions, and towers, he's worth more research, in my opinion. He was known as the greatest military engineer of his time. That's saying a lot, isn't it?